Okay, starting Sim Samachay. We'll go through essentially whatever I think is important in Sim Samachay. Everything is important, but some points I want to emphasize. In Sim Samach Gimel Samach Daled, we dealt mainly with the halachas of a מבוי and tikkun מבוis. And now we're going to be dealing with a מבוי which was properly done, and it was שנפרץ מצדו. It got a purtzah on its side. Now purtzah beroisho we already discussed. The shit of the Tzemach Tzedek and Alter Rebbe. There's what's considered a purtzah. How big of a purtzah? Do we have to be machmer for 3-4 tfachim or tenamas? Next to Tzorah Pesach beroisho מבוי, etc. That's mainly was discussed in Tzemach Tzedek Sim Mem Aleph. Now we're going to talk about מבוי שנפרץ מצדו, a מבוי which had a purtzah happened on its side. So we'll start at the beginning. I'm just going to go through certain points in the Siman and emphasize certain things. In Sif Aleph of the Mechaber says that the מבוי, which was properly done before, is properly done, and it has a purtzah on the side in a way that there's still a pas daled tfachim by the entrance of the מבוי, which means, let's use this as usually I use the box of the gatloch, it's easier. It's my Erev props. So this is the מבוי, and this is a regular מבוי, the two sides is closed, and here is the entrance to the מבוי, and then it got a purtzah right here, close to the head of the מבוי. So if there's a pas of 4 tfachim by the head, close towards the end of a מבוי, towards the front of the מבוי, before the purtzah, there's a pas of 4 tfachim, which is a shiur, not a shiur מבוי, but a shiur hemshech מבוי, then it's kosher as long as this purtzah is less than 10 amas. As long as this purtzah is less than 10 amas, as long as since you have 4 tfachim here by the beginning, it's enough. But if there's less than 4 tfachim remaining over here, this whole purtzah is asur, unless you have less than 3 tfachim in this purtzah, which makes it as if it's completely non-existent. What is the reason for it? It's explained in the Taz right away in the beginning of the Sif. I'm just telling you what it says in the books. When you have a pas of 4 tfachim remaining, it means that the purtzah on the side did not completely eliminate mevatel, the main Pesach, and therefore it's still considered a kosher מבוי, a מבוי that was nichshar, but just a מבוי with a purtzah. But obviously, if it's less than 4 tfachim, then it's no longer kosher מבוי with a purtzah. Rather, it's that nisbatel, the main Pesach. Even though, next point is, what's this shiur hemshech מבוי that's relevant over here? Even though we know that the shiur מבוי, regular מבוי, is daled amas, over here, being that we have already a מבוי that's daled amas, so when it's nifratz, all you need something minimal which should hold up the hemshech of the מבוי, and then for that you only need a 4 tfachim, because that's enough to hold up the Pesach. What you need is to make sure that the Pesach remains a Pesach of a מבוי. It's not nisbatel, the main Pesach of the מבוי. Third point that Taz points out over here is the Mechaber goes according to the Shittas Rambam that over here what we're focusing on is the definition of a מבוי, and as long as this מבוי still has the definition of מבוי, the name of a מבוי, and the entryway still has the definition of מבוי and the name of a מבוי, it still remains kosher. That's the Mechaber, because he follows the Rambam. However, the Tur, in the name of a Rosh, he takes a different approach, that it doesn't have anything to do with whether the title of the מבוי remains and the title of a door remains, has to do with the din of Baki Beirabim or not. And that means it's essentially a practical question. If the people of the Mavoi are going to right now stop using the main doorway and start using the side doorway, so b'meila it's already automatically canceled the Pesach of the Mavoi. And therefore you need a tikkun in the Purtza even if you have a pas which is daled tfachim remaining. And therefore the Taz concludes that being that the halacha we take the approach that we paskin that the idea of baki b'irabim is a practical problem, and that's how we paskin. We don't eliminate that problem. And therefore, every case we have a pirtza, every single scenario, the first thing we have to look at is whether there is baki rabim or not, which are going to be mevatel this, which are going to be mevatel the hekef. Therefore, he says, if the pirtza is open to a clean place, it means not a dirty or a muddy place, it's open to a street or open to some place which is comfortable to walk in, so it needs a tikkun. But if it's open to a place which is dirty, which is muddy, which is not a place that people are usually going to walk through it, so you don't have the bekiyas rabim, and therefore it's not a problem. Rishus rabim or a karmelis, yeah. Now, that's the Taz. The Taz is a long Taz. The Magen Avram gives a different reason why you need the pas of Dalat Tfachim, why the Mechaber takes the pas of Dalat Tfachim over there. He says it's not because of Shiur Hemshech Mavoi like the Taz wants to do it. The Magen Avram says it is as if these 4 Tfachim are now considered as like a Kaira, and it's already considered a Tikkun. And therefore, what happens is that this becomes like a tikkun for the doorway of the Mavoi, and therefore this pirtza is already mesukit. This 4 tfachim pas that's remaining in the entrance of the Mavoi, this is considered like a kairo, which is machshir the opening.
Where's the? Say that?
It's the beginning of Mishnah. 1 second. I'll read you the Lashon of the Magen Avram. Sifkot and Beis. Towards the end, he says, the whole Magen Avram is, Afagav Pochas Meisaram is Mikri Pesach. Hocho Chayshinon Dil Moshavki B'nei Mov Pesach Hamov V'yelcha B'Pesach Zel Lekatzer Darkom. They're going to avoid it. Ubotel Letikun. That means you're going to have a problem with Bekiyas Rabin. The Be'inon Kaira Gabi Mavoi V'leika. You don't have the opening on this new pirtze because Baki B'irabim, and there isn't. Avak Shanisha Pasar Bo Tfachim. When you have a pas which is 4 Tfachim wide, Mikri Kaira Gabi Mavoi, we consider it as if it's a Kaira Gabi Mavoi. It's Lashon of Magen Avram. The Alter Rebbe seems to combine all the days together in Sif Aleph. And he says, first of all, the first point is, the Alter Rebbe keeps on repeating in every single place you're going to see it, Parutz, Rishus Harabim, Oile Karmelis. Every single place that we're talking about Mevoyis, the Alter Rebbe seems to remind you again and again, this is, the Parutz is to Rishus Harabim or to a Karmelis, the same din, whether it's open to Rishus Harabim or to a Karmelis when it comes to the dinim of Mevoyis, and the Alter Rebbe sends you, and the Manamokim sends you to the Taz, where the Taz paskins the same way. And the Alter Rebbe first brings the reason of they're going to start using what's the problem with the pirtza on the side of close to the head of the Mavoi, that they're going to start using it, and they're going to completely eliminate the first one. What's going to happen? It's going to be Mevato, the name. The Pesach Mavoi, the definition, the category of Pesach Mavoi is going to be Nizbatel from the Pesach Ha'ikari, from the main Pesach. And therefore, you're going to lose the Tikkun which was done in the main Pesach, and you're going to have a problem. However, this only applies when you don't have 4 Tfachim. Why? Because if you have still 4 Tfachim remaining on the side, then that still works, because the Pesach of the Mavoi still is mesukin there's still a tikkun for the Pesach of the Mavoi that leads into the Mavoi. These 4 Tfachim consider it as if it is there's still an existing Mavoi, and if there's still an existing Mavoi, there's still an existing Pesach, and the Pesach still has the Lechi or the Kaida or whatever else is there, and therefore it is fine. The next point is, if there was already a Purtzah, and the Purtzah was done in such a way that it left less than 4 Tfachim over there, so you could think to yourself, let's make this life simpler. I only have 3 Tfachim, I'll just make the Purtzah, I'll shrink the Purtzah a little bit on the side and make the path and make this remaining part into 4 Tfachim, and then now I have 4 Tfachim on the side. That doesn't work, the Alter Rebbe says, because once it was Nisbatel, this Mavoi from the category of a Mavoi, and Nisbatel the Pesach of the Mavoi from the category of a Pesach, it doesn't help anymore, and what you would need is really to build it up to 4 Amos, and then you make a pass. That's the only way it's going to work. Why? Because you have to be machshir the whole Mavoi from the beginning. Because once the Mavoi loses its status as a Mavoi, because it has less than 4 Tfachim, you have no longer able to use this Mavoi and say, just fix it back to 4 Tfachim. That completely eliminates the previous standard that it is. The next point Alter Rebbe points out over here is, the Mavoi does not become possible. It's important to know, and this is straight of Shulchan Aruch, the Mavoi does not become possible even if you have a lot of openings on the side. As long as each opening is less than 10 Amos, you're good to go. And just to point out, this is what he says over here about Pirtzis in the side of the Mavoi. We already learned that, according to Alter Rebbe, even Beroish HaMavoi, when you have this opening of up to 10 Amos, and the way Tzemach Tzedek explains it, is also not Mevatel the Mavoi. It's not only Betzidi HaMavoi, it's also in the head of the Mavoi. That's where Hirchik Tzur Sapesach Menakaiso, up to 10 Amos works. However, all this seems to fit with the Shitta of the Rambam. Then Alter Rebbe continues, however, if there's Rabin Baikin Boy, and this comes to the Shitta of the Tur, in this new Purtzah, and that fits also with how the Taz, the Shitta of the Taz, and how is that possible? That it's open to, if it's not open to it says if there is no, this all applies if there is no Rabin Baikin Boy. For example, if there is no, if it's open to a dirty place, or you have gidudim, you have those things sticking out, the wall broke in such a way that you still have gidudim, the pieces of the wall sticking out into the Pesach, which make it hard to walk, and sticking into the Pesach siphon the floor to make it impossible, not impossible, but make it not so comfortable to walk past it. There's still remainder of the existing wall, so you're basically going through a open break in the wall rather than going through a clear path, then it's fine. But if Rabin Baikin Boy, you still need a tikkun, even if there is 4 Tfachim remaining. And as the Alter Rebbe, something very important over here, that you have to make the tikkun with a Tzuras HaPesach. Why? Because as we learned, what happens now is the side Pirtzah that Rabin Baikin Boy is open to the Rosh Hashanah or Carmelis. The front door is open to, the front opening of the Mavoi is open to the Rosh Hashanah or a Carmelis. Well, how did this become? This section became like a Mavoi Mefulish. And since it's a Mavoi Mefulish, you can't have a Lechi or a Kaida on both ends. You have to have a Lechi or a Kaida on one end and Tzuras HaPesach on the other end. Therefore, since you already have a Lechi or a Kaida in the beginning of the Mavoi, now with this new Pirtzah, the only way you could go around it is with a Tzuras HaPesach. Now, this is what the Alter Rebbe says over here. Now, we did discuss in the past what there's the Tshuvas of the Tzemach Tzedek and Alter Rebbe again in the same topic of Nifratz, of Tzuras HaPesach, Hirchik Tzuras HaPesach Min HaKaisel over there, and we have to say, and it's pretty clear that the only way this would work, so it shouldn't be a stira, because over there it just says that Hirchik Tzuras HaPesach up to 10 Amos is fine. The Sheiris Yehuda takes the approach over there that you have to make sure there's no Baki Boy Rabim, and even hiluch al yedei atchak is still considered a hiluch. That's what the Sheres Yehuda requires in Tzuras Pesach. But if lu yitzur, there is a baki b'irabim in the big opening by the Rosh Hamavoi, you obviously still have to make a tikkun. And obviously also, as long as the main Pesach was not nisbatel, the main Tzuras Pesach, because of the Pritza on the side. Because if you have the Pritza on the side and the head of the Mavoi, the Pritza next to the head of the Mavoi, of up to 10 ames, and it's baki b'irabim, so then, or nisbatel, the main Pesach, then you can't say that it will still continue working. So even over here, in the Alter Rebbe, he does not mention this idea regarding Pirza Bereisha Mavoi, and in the Shuvas he doesn't mention so much about this point of Baki Beirabim, or Nizbatel Tzuras Pesach, the main Pesach Nizbatel, the Torah, the shame of Pesach from it. Still we have to apply it over here also, otherwise you can be stuck with a contradiction from the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch to the Alter Rebbe in Shuvas and to the Tzemach Tzedek, so therefore you're better off figuring out a way to do it the right way, and that way you're not going to have a problem with stira. Otherwise, if you're going to be whatever it says in the book, that over here doesn't mention Baki Beirabim, when you come up with a Gevaldik Chiddush and a stira, that a Pirza B'tzad Mavoi is the only time when a Baki Beirabim and eliminates the Pesach B'Rosh Mavoi, but if you have a Pirza B'Rosh Mavoi, it doesn't. And therefore, it makes much more sense to follow the way it's understood in the Sheres Yehuda. You just don't have to go all the way, like the Sheres Yehuda that says that even Hiluch al Yedei Atchak is enough. And it's important also to point out, if you read in the style of the question, Sai by Tzemach Tzedek, Sai by the Sheres Yehuda, where the question is more defined, you see that we are talking over there that Staka was not comfortable to walk over there because there was gedudim, there was things sticking out over there on the side of the Tzuras HaPesach. I'll just read for you exactly the Lashon. The Lashon of the Tzemach Tzedek is that Tzuras HaPesach is made further from 3 tvachim from the wall of the Mavoi. You can't bring it all the way close. That is because you have these mounds of earth that are sticking out in front of the houses, which is the porches in front of it, and therefore that means there is something that's blocking these pathways on the side. Is not like smooth, like a mokim noki or a smooth walking over there. It's like these gedudim. So therefore, if you look at the style of the question, it all works out. Let's go back to it now. If the mavoi was fixed with a tzuras pesach at the head of the tzuras pesach and not with a lechi or a kaira, let's say you have a mavoi, like we said, because until we discussed until now was with the mavoi is open. Mavoi has a tikkun of a lechi, and then you have a pirtza on the side. What happens if the mavoi has a tikkun of a tzuras pesach by the entrance of the mavoi? So then, and we look at tzuras pesach as a mechitza. The question is, what would happen if you have a pirtza on the side that is less than 10 ames? Do we still say the same din that we said over here or not? So the Alter Rebbe doesn't discuss it, but the Tzemach Tzedek does discuss it in the same Siman Mem Aleph and the Tshuva, which was discussed, the same Tshuva that we're discussing a few times, in Ois Hey. Over there he says, first of all, if it's a tikkun of Tzuras HaPesach, it's still considered Oymed. Right? We consider the Tzuras HaPesach as we consider it a Mavoi Akum. Like we said, like the Alter Rebbe says. And when you have a Mavoi Akum, B'kiyas Rabim is Paisel, as opposed to Bereisha, even if it's Omed Merubah Al Parutz. What does Omed Merubah Al Parutz in this scenario means? That when you put the pirtza under, the pirtza happened on the side, if you still measured the walls, you still have Merubah Omed Al Parutz. Because obviously, if after the pirtza you have less than Merubah Omed Al Parutz, so obvious that the pirtza is not going to help, that the pirtza needs a tikkun. And therefore, the Tzemach Tzedek over there says if you have a pirtza of Dal Tvachim on the side, it's possible and it still needs a tikkun. That's how he starts in Oisei. Tzemach Tzedek continues in Ois Vav, and he says, that it doesn't make sense to say that B'kiyas Rabim and the Pritza on the side is because of a din of Mavoi Akum, because he lists a whole 3 or 4 differences between the Mavoi Akum and the Pritza B'tzidai. And therefore the Tzemach Tzedek says, no, we can't say it's compared to Mavoi Akum. Rather, the only thing we could say is that the reason why a Pirtzas Mavoi on the side is Paisel and Dal Tfachim, regardless of what's there in the front, in the beginning of the Mavoi, is because since we were Mekel in the Mavoi, that you could fix it with a Lechi, therefore we were Machmir, that when you have a Pirtza on the side, Oymed Merubah is not going to help. But if you fixed it with this is all if you fix it with a Lechi. What happens if you fix it with a Tzuras HaPesach? Tzemach Tzedek doesn't say clearly, but it seems from Tzemach Tzedek that being that he says that Tzuras HaPesach is considered Kesosum Mamash, and it's not a Kula of a Mavoi. By a Mavoi we have a Kula of a Lechi, because Tzemach Tzedek says because we're Mekel, by a Mavoi, by a Lechi, we're Machmer, by a Pirtza. But if you say that you have a Tzuras HaPesach in the front, it's no longer the Kula of a Mavoi. It's Mamash Sosum. And therefore you could say, l'cha'ira, it's not going to make the Pirtza is not going to make it puzzle from the side if it's less than the size. And that's, if you look also towards the end of the Tshuva of Tzemach Tzedek, in Seif Tes, it's also mashma like that from there. It's interesting, the Mishnah Brura in Bir Halacha, on this seif in Shulchan Aruch in Dibra Masach Tzarech L'Saknei Sham, he understood from the Alter Rebbe Bepashtos like that if it's Tzuras HaPesach in the front, then the Pirtza doesn't damage it. And he writes, being that it's similar to Mavrim Mefullash, therefore he writes like this, therefore he writes, the Fidvar, according to the Alter Rebbe, Im Osu B'tzad Shepesach HaMovoi Boy Tzuras HaPesach, if they made a Tzuras HaPesach in the head of the Mavoi, Sagi b'mokim ha'pirtza b'lechi v'koira, you could use just a lechi and a koira, and you don't need a specific Tzuras HaPesach there. And he says that that's what he saw in a bunch of Achreinim and the Even Oizer, and he says, but according to the Bach, you always need Tzuras HaPesach in the place of a pirtza, and he says, tzarich iyun l'maisa, whether you need a full Tzuras HaPesach or you could fix it with a lechi and a koira over there. Let's go back to Tzemach Tzedek over there and pretty much, but he's medayik from the Alter Rebbe, not from the Tzemach Tzedek. Lav dafki so the Tzemach Tzedek. Now let's back to the Tzemach Tzedek. This is just a side thing. Back to the Tzemach Tzedek in Sif Zayin over there, Noy Zayin over there. The Tzemach Tzedek continues that the Chumre, he points out that the Chumre of the Pirtza of the Mavoi is only on the 2 walls on the sides. That means the Mavoi you enter from here, from the top. You have 2 walls along the sides. This whole Pirtza Mavoi the Pirtzas Mavoi that's Paisel, even up to Dalat Tfachim, even a small Pirtza is on these 2 sides, not on the bottom one. That means on the bottom one if there's a Pirtza, or if in the front one if there's a Pirtza, it's not the same. And he explains, and then he brings what Alter Rebbe says. Then afterwards he says, well, because Tzemach Tzedek went through the whole thing to explain why you cannot compare Pirtza B'tzad Mavoi to Mavoi Akum, but then he says, but ultimately the Alter Rebbe does compare it to Mavoi Akum, and he says therefore you have to do the tikkun like the Alter Rebbe says. He doesn't discuss whether you have to put Tzuras HaPesach or not, but he still says, still in all, if it's only in the 3rd or 4th wall rather than the 2 main walls on the 2 sides, it's not a chumra of a pirtza b'tzidoi. Rather, it's a pirtza b'roishoi, and the pirtza b'roishoi up to 10 ames is oymed merubah helps, and for sure Tzuras HaPesach helps. And he concludes, concludes by saying that even have another svara to be mekel, because we're not going to say that the big Pesach is going to get eliminated when you have a small pirtza. When you have a small pirtza at the other end, or at the beroishoy, or at the other end of it. He says the only time we have a chashash, and this is an important svara, the only time we have a chashash, that the pirtzas mavoi is going to eliminate the main Pesach is only when it's along these two sides, the two big sides. But if it's in the front, you have a big Pesach, and next to it you have a small Pesach, then you're not going to say people are going to start avoiding the big Pesach and going through the small Pesach. Same thing, if you have a Pesach on the bottom of the Mavoi and the Ruach Dalet Shel Mavoi, you're not going to say suddenly that Pritza is going to be enough to eliminate the main Pesach in the front. The only time we say that it eliminates the Pesach, according to logic, is only if it's on the sides. Therefore, he explains why Pritza Betzad Mavoi is different than a Pritza Beroish Mavoi, and even Betzad Mavoi only applies to the two sides. Now, I'm just going to discuss something as a Maimer HaMuzgar. It's not so connected to this, but since we're talking about it, so we might bring it up. What happens, now we say, we just explained that a Pritza in Ruach Gimel or Dalet Shel Mavoi, according to Tzemach Tzedek, whether it's in the front of the Mavoi, in the back of the Mavoi, it's much less than a Pritza on the two sides. Now is a question, what is the din when the Mavoi is not square, not rectangle? It's a circular Mavoi, it's a circle. It doesn't have 4. Or a Mavoi that we designed and it has more than 4, it has 5 or 6. Yeah, and there's different ways how to look at a circle. Right? And this is negayat a bunch of dinim. Sides negayat to meruba imed. If you say it, you have to calculate each side by itself. It's negayat a pirtze bekeren zavis. What's keren zavis over here? If it's a circle, where do you do the keren zavis? And it's negayat a pirtze betzad mavoi. Where's the tzad? Where's the front? And all these things. And there's a bunch of ways to look at it. And I don't know if there's any hachra in it. I'm just pointing out there's different ways to approach it, and obviously in every scenario, since we say that when it comes to mechitzas, we are not going the din of being mekel and Eirovin. We're medayik from the Alter Rebbe that only applies to dinei Eirov, like shit of mevoyes, and not to dinei mechitzas. Obviously, since we're talking over here about mechitzas, so you should be machmer. But let's go through the different options that you could do it. First one is, let's take the circle and square it off. How do we do that? Where do we have it over here? We could do it by tchumen, by Eirov tchumen, we square it from the outside. By a sukkah, when we make the measurements, we square it from the inside. Yeah. Now, with lav dafka, you could bring a proof from either of them, because by tchumen, it's a shaila of a measurement. That's what it says in shaila of how to measure. It's not a shaila of mechitzas, and by a sukkah, the reason is because you need zayin al zayin tfachim inside. So therefore, the only way to measure it is by putting a square inside the circle. But there's the first two ways of looking at it. Another one is we look at each. This only applies when you have more than 4.
Only that you look on the entire outside.
What's the difference? If you do mitzad pirtze betzad mavoi, big difference. Let's say I have a circular. This is the box inside, and I have a circle. It's not really a box, but close enough. You have a circle. If you have a circle outside, right? A circle, and inside of it is a box, right? So when I have a pirtze that's in the arc, yeah, how do I measure the less than 10 amas? Do I imagine that the circle is still existent and I measure 10 amas like this, or do I measure 10 amas like this? And based on the box. If the box is inside, that'll make a difference if the box is inside. Then if we have, what's the distance of it to the corners? 4 tfachim away from the corner. Now, but let's say another way of doing it is, this only applies when you have more than 4, that you look at each side independently. Yeah, that doesn't apply by a circle, obviously, because you don't have any specific walls. And then min ha-Torah. Yeah, what do we say min ha-Torah? 2 and a bit is enough, right? But the question is, what's 2 and a bit? Do we say that the din of 2 and a bit midiraisa means that you're allowed to have the remaining 1 3/4 open? You can always have 1 3/4 open. So when you have 6 when you have 6 sides, all you can have open is 1 3/4, or it means 2 1/2. It doesn't make a difference how you do the 2 1/2. That's another way of looking at it. You can look, if you go based on a svara of you looking at the main Pesach. Yeah, if you take the svara that you go based on what the main Pesach is, so you look at it and you see, you have a not a diamond shape, but a 5 hexagon, pentagon shapes, 5 or 6. Then you'll take the one that's open to the Reshus Harabim on one side, and you'll look at the other end, what's open to it. And on the 2 sides, you might have 2 walls on each side that going the other ways. Also, another way of looking at it. It's also a problem. And another way of doing it is we're not going to make a square, but we're just going to go based on Ruchis Ha'olam. We'll say that it doesn't make a difference what the shape is, but when the Shulchan Aruch says 4 sides, so any walls that are mostly leaning towards Tzafin is considered 1. The ones that are mostly leaning towards Mizrach is 1. The walls that are mostly leaning towards Ma'ariv is another one, and Darim is another one. Again, you're going to have a problem with a circle because you're not going to know how to deal with a circle. So it's definitely not a good idea to make a mavoi as an exact circle or anything of the sort. If you're planning a mavoi, then do it properly. The same suffix you also have in a triangle. You have less than 4. Huh? I think days. These are svaras that are applied, discussed in different places. There's no specific person that goes through. I think in Rabbi Bloy Sefer, I forgot the name of it. It was a Shabbos, maybe, I don't know what it is. On Ceirovin, he discusses some of these ideas. If you have a triangle, according to Chachamim, 2 is not enough. 2 1/2 is not enough. You need 3 full walls. Does that mean by a Mavoi, which is a complete triangle, do you need to have a full tzuras Pesach on the third one? You can't use a lechi or a kaira or not? That's some Maimon Amuz going to point it out to you. I do not have any achrayas on that, so I'm just leaving it up in the air and try to avoid doing such things, getting into such problems. Let's continue to Sif Dalet. This is just pointed as a mamash as a Maimon Amuz. Sif Dalet, Alter Rebbe continues and says, "Ar mevoyos, even though that they're considered like a chotzer, and by a chotzer, a Purtza is never oiser, even if Rabim boikim boy until 10 ames, only until 10 ames. And by the way, this proves what the Tzemach Tzedek wrote in Chidushim, that in more than 10, you have to be machmer, even by a chotzer that becomes pasul in B'kiyas Rabim, even though it's a Reshus Yachid. Still no, the Rebbe says over here, being that it's a Purtza B'tzidoi, and usually by a chatzar we usually would not be machmer, but over here we would be machmer. And you have to make a tikkun even in a Purtza of Dalet Tfachim if Rabim boikim ba. And Bechlal, like we already discussed last time, that this whole din of Mevoyes Shalom that the Alter Rebbe is talking about, that the Ramah is talking about, it's not so easy to apply it today with the way the houses are built. If each house, you don't have chatzeres unless you look at the houses where each house has 2 residences, like it's a Machzedek says. Alter Rebbe continues, if you have an Ire Mukefes Chayma, where you have a Purtza of 4 Tfachim and Rabim Baikim Boy, you have to be machmer to make a tikkun, even though this city, which is Mukef Chayma from all sides, doesn't have a single mavoi that would require a tikkun. You still should be machmer, you should be machmer to make a tikkun. But if inside the city there's a mavoi which would require a tikkun medina, then you have to fix the Purtza and the Chayma Sa'ir medina. That is in Sif Beis. Sif Gimel Daled, Alter Rebbe discusses I said Daled, I meant Sif Beis. That's what I just said, Sif Beis. Sif Gimel Daled, Alter Rebbe discusses a mavoi which is completely open to a chotzer, and afterwards the chotzer was nifratz to a reshus harabim or carmelis from the second side. In the beginning of Sif Hey, which is what I'm going to go into now, it discusses if you have a mavoi which got opened up to a rechava sha'choyrei abatim, which is essentially a karfif. If it's less than beis asayim, or it's more than beis asayim, but it's hukaf l'direh, and it has the same din as nifratz l'chotzer, which is discussed Sif Gimel Dad. However, if the mavoi was nifratz to a karfif shaloi hukaf l'direh, then this mavoi is considered as if it was nifratz to a carmelis, and it always requires a tikkun in the place where the mavoi connects to the karfif. Right? As long as it's more than 4 tfachim, and the rabim boikim boy, even if it's not nifratz b'milui, which is, and even if it's not white 10 ames, and this is even if the karfif is completely closed from all sides except for this pritza to the mavoi, it still needs a tikkun over there. Which is something which is hard to understand, and the Alter Rebbe himself asks on it in Kuntra Sachin Shimim Hey Sifkat and Beis, towards the end of it. The Alter Rebbe over there asks why would this rechava, which is completely closed and only open to the mavoi, be poisol the mavoi that it needs a tikkun. This rechava doesn't have anybody living in it. L'chayre shouldn't be poisol anything. Why is it suddenly considered a mavoi amafulish which needs a tikkun? Really, it should be considered like a pritza in a mavoi where there's no rabim boikim boy and it's not 10 ames, or it's nifratz to a chotzer she'ena mureves, or all these other dinim where we are not poisel the mavoi based in the pritza. Over here we are poisel the mavoi based in the pritza. The Alter Rebbe says tzarich yun on this. Leaves it in the question mark. There's no answer in the Alter Rebbe, and I did not find an answer to it. But the Alter Rebbe obviously wrote in Shulchan Aruch like that. The Alter Rebbe wrote tzarich yun on it, but still left in the Shulchan Aruch as it is. Now, what's interesting to point out, there's a short paragraph in Chidushim in the Tzemach Tzedek on Maseches Eiruvin in Perek Aleph, but not in the regular Chidushim, but in the Hisofis to the Chidushim, which is in the end of Perek Aleph, which is in your book in page 92. I'm not going to read it this time. I'm just going to point out to you what the points over there is. Over there, he brings this din of if the mavoi was nifratz to a rechava, which is more than beis asayim and not hukaf l'dira, and it's that it needs a tikkun over there. And then he mentions another point over there. He says that in the Gemara in the Tosfos it says that even if there are gifufim in that the thing sticking out from the wall over there by this pritza, it still doesn't work, and you cannot consider it like a lechi. Why? Because these gifufim are not enough for the rechava to be considered, even though by a mavoi it is considered, by a rechava it's not. Therefore it's not, and then he points out that it's clear. He says he doesn't even, he just brings that shit of Tez, and he brings the shit of the Ritva, that the Ritva disagrees on it and says that this is something which has no reason whatsoever. Being that gifufim do help for a mavoi, then if there are gifufim over here, then it will also help, and it does not need a tikkun. And the Ritva points out, whatever it says in the Gemara, that gifufim don't help, is only talking about gifufim which are wider than 4 ames, which that doesn't help in a mavoi, even mishum lechi. But if it's less than 4 ames, which would help a gifufim in the lechi, which would be considered like a lechi by a mavoi also, it would be able to work. Now the Alter Rebbe doesn't get into the discussion over here in this case about the gifufim. The only place the Alter Rebbe mentioned that is earlier.
What's the 4 ames? The Purcell?
No, the gifufim. He says the Gemara that says gifufim don't help as a lechi is when the gifufim are so big of 4 ames. But here, anything less than 4 ames, if the gifufim are there, they help that you don't need a tikkun in the pirza. The Alter Rebbe doesn't get into it. The Alter Rebbe just says if you have a pirza in the side of, and if you have a pirza from the mavoi into the chava, that's beis asayim or less, it needs a tikkun, and the Alter Rebbe doesn't tell you if there is gifufim or not, do you still need a tikkun or not? Now, Alter Rebbe doesn't go into a discussion whether tikkun is, whether it helps or not. You could say mitzad svare, that being that the whole purpose is to be mesak in the mavoi, not to be mesak in the rechava, then it should work just like by a mavoi, the shittas haritva. The Aruch HaShulchan in Sifkat Yud Aleph takes a pretty clear approach, and he says clearly that the only time that you have to make a tikkun is if there was no gifufim left over there, or a pirtza which is more than 10. But if there are gifufim, and the pirtza is less than 10, you don't have to make a tikkun going into the rechava. That's only talking about when the mavoi is open to rechava, and the rechava is not open to anything else. But if it's open to a shvil from the other side, to a pathway, and the pathway has walls on both sides, and the pathway goes all the way to the river, and then all the people bring their animals to the river to drink over there. So it needs a lechi when you enter from the mavoi into the rechava, and it needs a tzuras HaPesach when you go from the rechava into this pathway leading to the river. Why? He says because the lechi that you put in the beginning of the rechava converts the whole karfif into mukaf ladira, because lechi is mishum mechitza. And even though that usually a lechi does not help to make a karfif into mukaf ladira, even the tzuras HaPesach doesn't help to make a karfif mukaf ladira, and even the mechitza gemura doesn't help to make a karfif mukaf ladira unless you break more than 10 amas and then you rebuild it. Still in all, over here, being that it does help for the purpose of the mavoi, the lechi helps to machshir the mavoi, and you put it at the entrance between the rechava and the mavoi, so that's enough to that also was machshir the rechava for hukaf ladira for this purpose, that you don't need a tzuras HaPesach in that entrance. However, in the shvil, you're not allowed to carry. Why? Because the shvil has an opening you have a tzuras HaPesach on one end, but the other end is completely open to the river, and the only way it's going to work to be able to carry in this pathway going to the river is only if the river has a drop of 10 tvachim until the water. That's considered a mechitza. Or the depth of it is, and the depth is mislakit in such a way it's a mechitza. But if it's not mislakit, it doesn't have a 10 tvachim height, then it's not it doesn't work as a mechitza. And the Alter Rebbe says it's even if you have gedudim across the river, and you have gedudim over there. And that's essentially, there's a few other points in that seif, but I'm not going to go into it. I'm going to jump to the end of the סימן. End of the סימן for seif tes and on. And that's talking about when you had a מבוי which was done kilchase before Shabbos, and then it broke on Shabbos. So if you have a מבוי which had a lechi or a koida, and the lechi or the koida fell down in the middle of Shabbos, Alter Rebbe says asur misham va'elach, it's asur from that moment when it fell and on. Why? Because it's pasuach to a reshus harabim or to a Carmelis, like the Alter Rebbe says here. I explained to you already in Siman Shin Samach Beis. What's in Siman Shin Samach Beis? You look over there in Sif Vav and Sif Zayin. We have the din of Shabbos shehutra miktsasa hutra kula. When do we say Shabbos hutra miktsasa hutra kula or loy hutra kula? It depends when this tikkun that you're doing now that fell, if the tikkun is what created a reshus hayachid. So when the tikkun falls down and it becomes open to the reshus harabim or Carmelis, then it goes back to being asur. But if the reshus hayachid if the tikkun that fell does not revert the state of this to something which is asur, but it still remains the reshus hayachid, which the chachamim were only asur to carry in it. For example, if it has other mechitzis that keep it as a reshus hayachid min hatayra, the only thing is you can't carry it in the Seifrim, then we do say Shabbos,
Mitzad Carmelis or mitzad Erev?
What?
Chama asked, in which case do we say
Mitzad carrying.
No, mitzad carrying mitzad Erev or
mitzad Erev is towards the end of the Sif. It's two separate things. It's considered reshus hayachid midaraisa, and the fact that if a tikkun fell on Shabbos, and the tikkun was only there for the purpose of being matir tiltul midrabanon, but midaraisa it's still considered reshus hayachid, and it does not lose its status of reshus hayachid because of this tikkun falling, then it's still considered kosher. Over here in Siman Shin Samachay, when the lechi fell and its part is b'milui to a reshus harabim or to a carmelis, you have a problem, and then it loses its status as a reshus hayachid where you are allowed to carry midiraisa, and therefore it's nesar from here going further. And the Alter Rebbe over there in Shin Samach Beis and over here is going to tell you there's no difference in reshus harabim and a carmelis. Now Alter Rebbe over here continues. Therefore, based on the above, if you have a city which is mukefet chayma, and you put tikunei mevoyos in there, but why did you put tikunei mevoyos inside the city? Not because it needs it mitzad mechitzes, but because there's goyim over there, and you want to make sure that you have to separate the streets for the tikunei to be able to close off the area where you want to carry. So over there, the city is anyways reshus hayachid the whole time. The only thing that you did tikkun mevayos is because you had to make it between the two, between the streets where the Yidden live and the streets where the Goyim live. So the only thing that's missing over here is mitzad. The only we were missing was the Eruv because of Diras Nachrim. Therefore, they made a tikkun mevayos. So the Chayma, the wall of the city, still is separating the city from the reshus hayachid, from the reshus harabim or the carmelis. And therefore, over here, if there was a Purtzah, if there was a tikkun mavoi that fell inside the city, which is mukaf chayma, it became kevan shehutra hutra. When you have a suffix, when it fell, if it fell before Shabbos or during Shabbos, Alter Rebbe says we go lehakol because of suffix divrei soifrim hu. Ultimately, tikkun mevoyos in such a scenario is midivrei soifrim, and therefore it remains a divrei soifrim. But Alter Rebbe points out this only works even the places where hutra miktsasa, hutra miktsas Shabbos, and hutra kula only applies if the tikkun that you put over there was a tikkun that was able to roi lamid kol Shabbos, was able to be held to stand the whole Shabbos. But if it's something which was going to plan, which was clear that it's going to fall on Shabbos, and Alter Rebbe says two things. For example, places where there's a lot of goyim which will destroy it on Friday night, and Korav Levadai, it's a probable possibility that they're going to ruin it. Then the moment it breaks, it becomes asur, even if it did not lose its status of reshus hayachid. Even in the cases where before we say that if it falls, you can still carry hutra miktsasa. In such a scenario where it's planned to fall down, it doesn't work. And he brings the makar of it from Trumas Hadeshin. The examples that he brings is a simple example of when they made a eruv for the purpose of a suda, of a chuppah, a sheva brachas, a bris milah, or something of the sort, and the guy on Pashat not used to seeing these poles and everything over there, and they're just going to knock it down. Based on that, a simple thing is when you have mazikim from Bnei Yisrael, yeah, then obviously not chayshish that any Yid is going to go and break a Eruv on Friday night, but when the Yisrael Teiras, you hire the Goyim to break the Eruv on Friday night. If you're in, depends on which team you are. So therefore, you have to be careful in such a scenario that the Mogam Shemitzuim Goyim, and you know that they're going to do it, you have to do the Eruv in such a way that you have a problem. If the Eruv falls, you can't carry anymore. But that's an extreme example, but a more practical and common example is when there is construction work, or they replace electric wires, or or you have big trucks going through. If you have construction work and you have a Tzuras HaPesach, and there's construction work happening over there, and you know there's construction work planned, then it's Korav Levada that is going to break on Shabbos. They're going to remove something, they're going to do something, and therefore once it falls, you can't carry. You can't rely on the fact that it was Hutar and Erev Shabbos, and it happened on Shabbos. The same thing would apply if you have a hurricane watch or a tornado watch in a city, and you check the Erev before Shabbos, and the Erev is fine. If your Erev is based on Tzuras HaPesachs and strings and those kinds of things, there is a very high chance that your Erev will get destroyed over Shabbos.
Either way will be possible. Because it's not their Shushabah.
Wow.
If the kid will fall, it'll either way be possible.
Yeah. If what? No, not if it's, that's what we'll go to the next point. A lot of times you're not going to become possible, because a lot of times you make it in places where you have redundancy. I tell always people, you never make one Erev. you make with enough backups that if something fails, at least you have another shitta which works for you. You don't rely just on strings, you don't rely just on poles, you don't rely just on one thing. But you have to, what I'm saying is, even in places where it would be kosher otherwise, still, according to some shittas, still in all, if you're doing it, if it's in a place where there is a high chance it's going to break over Shabbos, then when it breaks, it becomes possible, and you can't use it.
A high chance that it's going to mean that the goyim will find it, or a high chance that if they find it, they'll break it.
If they see it, they'll break it.
Let's say if you're putting up these illegally, whatever, like off by the electric poles, and if they technically see it, they're
No, they don't work on Shabbos, usually, unless it's a danger. So therefore, I actually think that one of the reasons why the Rebbe says you shouldn't make ein license Eruv Ele Besoidius to Melbourne, the same thing to the other one, is aside from the fact that it should only work for the people that would make a mistake and can carry, or that would not know about carrying, it would be matzel as yidden from it, but it's practical also. If you're dealing with a city where there's goyim and there's going to be vandalism, then if it's besoidius and not the yidden know about it, not the goyim know about it, you have a less chance that it's going to break. But practically also, that's also probably the reason why the Rebbe says it's not shayich, practically, that and this letter was written in Tavshim and Beis. It was time of the Bar Park Eruv was being built, and yes, it was being put up and destroyed every week. Now the Alter Rebbe goes into Sif Yud and continues over there, discusses where you have a chatzeres, that they made a shituf chatzeres between them, shituf mevayis, and the kaida that separates them broke. That over there we say kevon shehutra because these places it's only taken chachamim to be able to carry from one chatzah to another chatzah, from one shosayachid to another shosayachid, and over here if it fell in the middle it's kevon shehutra, and it works for all. It's a very important point. It works only for those chatzeres which are open to each other, that you would technically be able to carry from one chatzah to another chatzah without going through they're all connected, either past something through a window, through a door, or they're directly open one to another. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe adds in the parenthesis, this is something which is a big machlekes aposkim, and the Alter Rebbe takes a more stricter approach, that you have to make sure that when you put the general city neighborhood Eruv, a lot of times the minhag always was to put it in the shul. You could only put it in the shul if the chatzar of the shul has two houses that are inside the chatzar of the shul, or the chatzar of the shul is open to another chatzar which has two houses in it, and that way the Eruv, even if something happens on Shabbos, there's still a use for this piece of food, that it could be carried, it could be eaten in one of the houses in the chatzeres, as opposed to the other shittis, which the Alter Rebbe mentions in the footnotes over there, that hold that it seems like they are matir in a shul, even when there is even when the chatzer is not open directly to it. If you look in the Siddur, in Hilchis, in the Seder Eruv Chatzeres, Alter Rebbe also says pretty clearly the same idea, that you cannot put it in the shul unless the shul has chatzeres that are open to it, and that is in the Siddur. I'll find it where it is. It's right before Kiddush Shalosh Regalim, and over here the Alter Rebbe says, "V'loyasu eruv chatzeres be'erev Pesach, elaim ken yesh beis batim echatzer beis hakneses sheyutru al yidei eruv zel taltel ulehavi ha'eruv mizel hazeh." Yeah, and that's, now, based on that, that's why, like I told you before, I believe, and I push people to always make redundancy when you make an Eruv. Don't rely only on one thing. Check, you inspect the city and you see how many, obviously when you build Eruv, you make it the best possible way, but check and see if you have a way to have a wider Eruv, maybe based on walls or other things. There's not the most perfect shittis, but at least that there should be a backup in case something falls, a string falls, it doesn't become automatically open to a Rishus Harabim or to a Carmelis, but it falls in a place where, at least according to certain shittas, it still remains the Rishus HaYachid, Midei Raisa, and therefore it will still be kosher enough that you don't have to stop carrying on Shabbos, you just have to fix it on Motzei Shabbos. And with this, we will conclude with Siman Shin Samachay, Mamshech next week, Mitzvah Hashem, and the next Siman.